Hello, class. Now, we are on session 9, part 2, Harry Truman. So we've got Harry Truman. Uh, all right, let's talk a little bit. Now, I'm going through the PowerPoint like I always do, guys. So I always encourage you to look at your PowerPoint as we're going through this. Harry Truman is 60 years old. He's a Democrat. Harry Truman is out of Missouri. Harry Truman is a very interesting guy. Like I told you guys, my father's generation would have clearly chosen Harry Truman as the greatest president of the 20th century because he got them out of that war. Now, Truman is probably noted through history as the president that dropped the atomic bomb. And that will be something either good or bad he will live with. But Truman did a lot of other things other than the bomb. Again, Truman will take over office after FDR has passed away, and he'll come in. Truman does not have a college education. It's really sad about Truman. Truman, as a young boy, had plans of going to college, and then what will happen is his father will go in, and the father will squander a lot of their money. Their father goes bankrupt, and because of that, Harry Truman's not allowed. He's not able to go to college. Very smart guy, by the way. You'll see that on a test question. It's which college did Harry Truman go to? The answer is none. You'll also see the question, very interesting, Harry S. Truman. What did the S stand for? Nothing. I think the mother and the father had a debate. I think it was one family had the name Ship, one had Stewart for the middle name. So he is Harry S. Truman. The S stands for nothing. I've always liked Harry Truman. I think he was a real basic fella. I think he was a guy that if you could see him in Carthage today, he would fit in really fine. He had these little round glasses. Harry Truman was an accomplished pianist. He becomes a St. Louis politician under a guy named Pendergast. Now, he takes a lot of criticism because Pendergast was somewhat of a corrupt politician in St. Louis. He will be put on FDR's ticket as the vice president simply because he comes from a place in the middle of the country, Missouri, and they really thought FDR thought he would be the perfect person to put. Guys, FDR had only met with Harry Truman maybe 2 times. And after FDR dies, Harry Truman doesn't even know about the Manhattan Project. Harry Truman's not even aware that we have an atomic bomb. I've always thought it was very interesting in the fact that Truman's decision to drop the bomb was very practical. I've always wondered if FDR would or not. Truman understood that we were fixing to lose 1.7 million servicemen on a massive juggernaut invasion into inland Japan. So Truman made that decision to simply drop the atomic bomb. He will also be involved in the Korean conflict. Now, what happens, guys, is that during Harry Truman's administration, the second administration, remember he finishes that FDR, he finishes his administration. During his second administration, communism will come out of North Korea and it will begin to move. Remember we talked about that parallel line that was set up. And basically the Soviets and the Russians plan to come in and to take all of Korea. Truman will make that decision to get us involved in the Korean conflict. Now, it's interesting because some people call it the Korean conflict. Other people call it the Korean War. It's a 2-year thing. Basically, we don't end up going advanced over that northern 39 parallel line, but we also keep the Soviets from taking South Korea. Probably the more interesting thing about it was we had a general named Douglas MacArthur. Now, Douglas MacArthur, guys, if you remember, was a famous general during the First and the Second War. Douglas MacArthur, in the beginning, was over the Korean conflict. Douglas MacArthur was an odd guy, but he was a brilliant general. And what he wanted to do is he began to push American troops beyond into North Korea, where we met resistance through the Chinese. Now, what Douglas MacArthur wanted to do, and please pay attention to this, Douglas MacArthur had asked Truman for permission to use the atomic bomb to bomb China. He wanted to drop several nuclear weapons into China and then make a massive invasion into China. Him and Truman had a disagreement. and MacArthur was extremely popular. He's a famous general, and little Harry Truman fires him. It's kind of interesting. Truman takes a lot of criticism because a lot of people love Douglas MacArthur. And they said, you know, who is this guy, Harry Truman? He's this little guy from Missouri. He's a little nobody. And he is going to fire the great Douglas MacArthur. Originally, when that decision was made, Truman took a lot of criticism. Over time, people have looked at it, and Harry Truman obviously saved us from World War III, guys. If we had unleashed an atomic weapon into China, there is no doubt whatsoever the Soviets, Russia would have launched a war against us. We would have then been in a war with both China and the Soviet Union. So Harry Truman kept us from that. He did bring us into the Korean conflict, takes a lot of criticism for that, but you got to remember, his policy was containment. He was trying to contain the Soviets from taking chunks of Asia, which they'll eventually do, guys. Everything from Korea to Vietnam. We look over to what's happening in Europe. Remember, it's under George Marshall, Secretary of State for Harry Truman. The Marshall Plan will funnel money into Europe and will keep Europe safe from the control of the Russians. Remember, the Russians have moved out of Russia. They've moved into Belarus. They've moved into Poland. They've moved all the way into Germany. They occupy East Germany. The Russians would have taken all of Europe, guys. All of Europe, as Winston Churchill once said, had fallen under an iron curtain. The Soviets were going to take it all. Harry Truman's administration believed in containment. Remember, guys, when we talk about presidents' policies, remember we talk about domestic and foreign policy. Domestic policy, actually, under Harry Truman, you will see it's not as dramatic as his foreign policy. But you will also see really quick his domestic policy will deal with the Soviet Union. His domestic policy will deal with containment and what he will do to try to stop that containment. Again, when he leaves office, the Korean War is still going on. He will also be involved in the establishment of the Jewish state of Palestine. That will be a Harry Truman thing, which is pretty cool. Harry Truman's famous quote, and I'll leave y'all with this, is that Hitler had murdered the Jews right and left. I saw it, I dreamed about it, even to this day. The Jews needed some place where they could go. It's my attitude that the American government couldn't stand idly by while the victims of Hitler's madness are not allowed to build a new life. So that was, as far as the Jewish community, that was very popular. He helped establish that. So we will end this lecture with Harry Truman. As far as the Truman Doctrine, we talked about that is containment. So you'll see that on a test question. The Marshall Plan, named under George Marshall, which brought in money, food, and other things to the Europeans. And that will be Harry Truman's legacy. Harry Truman will retire. I will tell you that after life, he goes back to Missouri. He becomes he's a very simple man. And Truman lived very simple after the war and after his presidency. They've looked into Truman, and Truman has become more popular as time has gone on. So I probably went a little bit more than I wanted to, but I wanted to really introduce you to Harry Truman. I think Harry Truman's a good guy. Like I said, he is your Democrat that follows under FDR that will end the war. He drops the atomic bomb not once but twice. He leads us into the Korean conflict, and he's responsible for the Marshall Plan. So now you know Harry Truman, and we will pick up in session 3 with another famous American, Dwight D. Eisenhower, the famous general that will come in and follow after Truman. Okay, guys, we'll see you then. Bye.